Michael never imagined that buying his dream home in the countryside would land him in a feud with an HOA he didn't even belong to. His property sat just outside the HOA's jurisdiction, a fact clearly marked on his deed. That was part of the appeal. No board meetings, no dues, no restrictions about mailbox colors or what flowers he could plant. Just peace, quiet, and freedom. But peace was the one thing his new neighbor Karen couldn't stand. Karen was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, a woman who strutted around with a clipboard and spoke as if she owned every inch of land within shouting distance. It all began on a sunny Saturday morning. Michael was tending his garden when Karen marched across the road, heels clicking, papers clutched in hand. She didn't greet him, didn't smile, just shoved the stack of papers toward him and said, "You've been served." Michael blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" Karen smirked. "This lawsuit is for your repeated violations of our HOA rules. Your mailbox, your siding, your lawn, all out of compliance. You'll be fined until it's corrected." Michael glanced at the paperwork. It was real. A lawsuit filed by the HOA with Karen's signature front and center. But one detail made him nearly laugh aloud. His address wasn't even listed within the HOA's legal boundaries. "You realize I don't live in your HOA, right?" Michael said, trying to keep his voice calm. Karen's expression hardened. "Your home borders our community. It affects property values. That makes you subject to our regulations whether you like it or not." Michael couldn't believe her arrogance. Not only was her claim absurd, but it was about to trigger one of the strangest neighborhood battles the county courthouse had ever seen. The following week, the situation escalated beyond anything Michael had expected. A certified letter arrived in his mailbox, and sure enough, it was confirmation of Karen's lawsuit. The HOA, with Karen leading the charge, was officially accusing him of multiple violations. The list was almost comical. They claimed his siding wasn't the correct shade of beige, his lawn was too natural and overgrown, and his mailbox was non-compliant with HOA standards. They even listed the style of his garden fence as an aesthetic hazard. Michael shook his head as he read through the nonsense. His property wasn't part of their maps, wasn't on their rolls, and certainly wasn't subject to their covenants. Yet here it was, an official complaint, stamped and filed. That evening, neighbors started whispering. Karen had been busy. She walked door to door, rallying support and spinning her version of the story. According to her, Michael was dragging down property values and trying to freeload off their community without respecting the rules. Some neighbors seemed skeptical, but others nodded, too nervous to disagree with Karen publicly. Michael, however, stayed calm. He had seen people like Karen before, loud, overconfident, and convinced that their authority extended far beyond its limits. If anything, the absurdity of the lawsuit only steeled his resolve. Still, there was no denying the frustration. He had worked hard to buy his home, carefully choosing it because it wasn't under HOA control. And now he was being dragged into court for the exact reason he had avoided. Michael tucked the lawsuit into a folder and sat back. "All right, Karen," he muttered under his breath. "You want a fight? You'll get one, but it won't end the way you think." Michael thought maybe common sense would prevail, but the next HOA meeting proved him wrong. He decided to attend, even though he wasn't technically a member. The moment he walked into the community hall, he could feel the tension. Conversations hushed, eyes turned toward him, and Karen sat at the front like a queen on her throne. She wasted no time. "This man," she announced, pointing directly at Michael, "believes he's above our community. He refuses to follow the same rules the rest of us live by. He's destroying the harmony we've worked so hard to maintain." Several board members nodded along, some more reluctantly than others. A few neighbors avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable. But the majority of the board seemed to back Karen without question. One even chimed in, "We cannot allow non-compliance to spread. If his house looks different, others will follow. That's how property values collapse." Michael raised his hand calmly. "With respect, my house isn't under your HOA. I bought my property specifically outside your jurisdiction. You don't have authority over me." Karen's lips curled into a smug smile. "We'll let the court decide that. For now, The board supports the lawsuit and will pursue penalties to the fullest extent." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors whispered that Karen was going too far, but others, likely fearful of her, stayed silent. Michael realized then that this wasn't just about him. It was about Karen's need for control and the HOA board's willingness to enable her. Leaving that meeting, Michael felt the weight of the hostility pressing on him. But instead of discouraging him, it sharpened his focus. If the board wanted to play legal hardball, he would be ready, with facts, not bluster. Michael knew better than to let Karen's antics rattle him. Instead of reacting emotionally, he treated the lawsuit like a project to be solved. First, he pulled out his deed and the official plat map from the county recorder's office. There it was in black and white. His property line ended exactly where the HOA's jurisdiction began. He wasn't inside their borders by even a single inch. Next, he drove to the county zoning office to request a certified copy of the map. The clerk chuckled when Michael explained the situation. "They're suing you for HOA violations when you're not in their HOA. That'll be the shortest case of the year," the clerk said, stamping the documents. Still, Michael wanted to be thorough. He contacted a real estate lawyer who reviewed the paperwork carefully. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Karen's case won't survive 3 minutes in court. Just bring these documents, stay calm, and let her dig her own hole. Judges don't take kindly to frivolous lawsuits." Michael organized everything into a neat folder: deed, maps, zoning codes, even copies of the HOA's own boundary documents, which clearly excluded his home. He rehearsed how he would present it, short and professional, without getting dragged into Karen's theatrics. Meanwhile, Karen was bragging to neighbors about her airtight case, convinced she had cornered him. Michael didn't bother correcting her. He let her bask in her false confidence. Knowing the truth would hit harder if she walked into court unprepared for how quickly her house of cards would collapse. By the time the court date approached, Michael was ready. Calm, focused, and armed with facts, he knew the next chapter of this bizarre battle was going to end before it even began. The day of the hearing finally arrived. Michael walked into the small county courtroom carrying his neatly organized folder. He wore a simple suit, nothing flashy, but his calm presence stood in stark contrast to Karen, who swept in with a stack of HOA binders under one arm and the entire board trailing behind her like loyal subjects. Karen strutted to the plaintiff's table, whispering and smirking as if she had already won. She greeted the judge with exaggerated confidence. "Your Honor, this homeowner has repeatedly refused to comply with our HOA's regulations. We have evidence of violations, siding colors, mailbox styles, even lawn maintenance. His property is lowering values and disrupting the uniformity of our community." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And this homeowner is within your HOA?" Karen lifted her chin. "He borders us, which means he affects us. Our jurisdiction should apply." The judge leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "That's not how HOAs work. Do you have proof his property falls under your association's recorded boundaries?" Karen fumbled through her stack of papers, flipping rapidly, muttering about bylaws and community harmony. The board members behind her shifted uncomfortably, realizing the argument was thinner than they'd been led to believe. Finally, the judge turned to Michael. "Sir, your response?" Michael stood calm as ever. He opened his folder and handed the clerk 2 certified documents, his deed and the county zoning map. "Your Honor, as you can see, my property lies entirely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. Their own boundary filings confirm this. They have no legal authority over me." The judge scanned the documents for less than a minute before nodding. Case dismissed. "The HOA has no jurisdiction. Mrs. Karen, consider this your warning. Filing frivolous lawsuits wastes court resources. Further actions like this could result in sanctions." Karen's face drained of color. 3 minutes into the hearing, her grand case had collapsed like a paper house in the rain. Karen's smugness shattered the instant the judge dismissed the case. She tried to argue, waving her stack of HOA papers wildly, but the judge cut her off with a firm tone. "Mrs. Karen, this matter is closed. You cannot enforce rules on a property outside your jurisdiction. Do not test this court's patience." Michael, standing quietly with his documents back in hand, didn't even bother to gloat. He simply nodded respectfully to the judge and turned to leave. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Karen's frantic attempts to save face. The entire courtroom buzzed with whispers. Some of Karen's own HOA board members exchanged glances, clearly embarrassed by being dragged into such a flimsy lawsuit. One even muttered, "She told us it was airtight." Karen's face flushed red as she realized what had just happened. 3 minutes. That was all it took to destroy her grand attempt at control. Her voice cracked as she tried one last desperate protest. "But, Your Honor, his house still affects our neighborhood values." The judge sighed heavily. "That is not a legal argument. Case dismissed. Leave before I consider sanctions." Karen froze, her jaw trembling, before storming out with her papers clutched tightly to her chest. Her board shuffled awkwardly after her, heads down. Michael walked out of the courthouse into the crisp air, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. No shouting, no drama, just facts and the law. He smiled as he thought about the irony. Karen had tried to flex her HOA power, but in just 3 minutes she had managed to humiliate herself instead. As Michael drove home, the weight of the past weeks lifted from his shoulders. Karen had tried to use fear, intimidation, and even the legal system to control something that was never hers to begin with. But when the dust settled, the truth was clear. Facts and law will always outlast arrogance and false authority. News of the case spread quickly through the community. Neighbors who had once avoided speaking up against the HOA began to feel empowered. If Karen could be shut down so easily, maybe they too could push back against overreach. Michael's quiet stand had become more than just a personal victory. It was a reminder that bullies only win when people stay silent. Meanwhile, Karen's reputation within her own HOA took a serious hit. Board members whispered about replacing her, while residents openly questioned her judgment. She had dragged them into a courtroom only to be humiliated in record time. The same power she tried to wield over others had now backfired spectacularly. For Michael, the lesson was simple. Never let someone convince you they have authority when they don't. Boundaries matter, and knowing your rights can be the difference between defeat and triumph. He looked out at his peaceful cabin that evening, the sun setting over the lake, and smiled. The land was his, the freedom was his, and no HOA could ever take that away. And for everyone watching, what would you have done if an HOA tried to claim authority over land they didn't own? Would you fight back like Michael or let them push you around? Sometimes all it takes is standing firm for 3 minutes of truth to change everything.